Well, hey, everybody, welcome back to another week of the Fixate and Binge podcast. I am your weekly host, as always, and I'm back for another week. But this week is unique to the last several months, meaning that I don't have a guest on this week. I took it upon myself to actually make an attempt to try not to schedule any guests during the week of Christmas. I didn't think that that was appropriate. So I thought that's probably the best for everybody, to just give everyone the week off, which I've done. And we'll pick up and get some more guests on this podcast in the new year. There has been quite a lot going on in entertainment, in pop culture, in the movie universe since our last episode. So much has happened, some of it very tragic and sad. The day that I was recording this podcast with my guest, Jeff Hopp, which if you haven't listened to last week's episode, please, after you finish this one, go back and listen to that one. My guest last week, Jeff from Detroit, Michigan, wrote and directed a wonderful film called Band on the Run, and it is a great coming-of-age story about the late 90s Detroit garage rock band scene that kind of peaked in the late 90s. And when the dust settled and the peak was over, the only real band that emerged from that scene was the White Stripes. And I know you've heard of the White Stripes. They're beloved. So this is a film that takes a look at other band experiences in that moment. And that includes some autobiographical elements from my guest last week, Jeff, who is an accomplished musician himself. But while we were recording that episode, I literally pressed stop on the record, got off the recording, and then got a tragic update. And the tragic update, of course, is Rob Reiner and his wife found slain. Now, this is old news at this point. It's been over a week since it happened. I don't even believe they've had the funeral yet, but that may happen by the time you hear this podcast. The formal funeral, the official funeral, as it were, will have already happened. I, like a lot of Americans, like a lot of people around the world who loved the films of Rob Reiner, I was in a bit of shock. What a tragic, horrible way to have your lives cut short. And immediately my mind was flooded with all the wonderful things that Rob Reiner has done as an accomplished and celebrated director. And I thought the best way to honor him, and as I think many have, is to pick a film that you love that Rob Reiner has directed and watch it. And the first one I picked, and I could have picked Princess Bride. I have that on Criterion, believe it or not. I've got the Criterion disc of that, or Stand By Me, or Misery. But the film I went with was Spinal Tap, my all-time favorite comedy from Rob Reiner. And I watched that this week, mostly because, yes, Rob Reiner directed, but also Rob Reiner appears in the film as the director of this mockumentary, which I wanted a Rob Reiner film, but I also wanted to see Rob Reiner in the film, if that makes sense. So I went with Spinal Tap, and it was great. It was just a nice therapeutic thing to do. I didn't know Rob Reiner. I didn't know him. None of us really did. You know, most of us listening to this will have not met him personally, but I felt like we knew him. I felt like he was America's uncle. There was something about him that was just so fun. He has such a wonderful eye for directing. I really, really enjoyed all of his film work, even the ones that were less embraced, like North. But I enjoyed him as a person, whether he was Meathead on All in the Family or Marty DeBurgi in Spinal Tap. But I just enjoyed reacquainting myself with Rob Reiner's work, which was just a joy, lots of fun. Now, unfortunately, we have a president of the United States who decided to take this tragic experience, this tragic event, and make it all about himself, and make it disgusting social media post that has drawn criticism from within his own ranks, within his own MAGA ranks. So there's hope. There's hope yet for some of the people that you may know that might seem far gone. Um, Even his own people were highly critical of the things he was saying about Rob Reiner and his wife, and I think that just reveals the depths of his soul, how truly dark you have to be to try and co-opt a terrible tragedy. I'm not even sure the bodies were in the body bags and pulled out of the house before he made this disgusting social media post. And you have to think back, has America ever experienced a president of the United States that would ever say something like this about Americans who did not support him and he did not agree with? And the answer is no. No. I really hope when historians look back on this period of history and they look back on the things he did as president, I hope they pay very close attention to his effect on the national discourse, his effect on the lack of empathy, the ugliness, the mudslinging. I want historians to take a fair and open-minded look at the type of pettiness America had to put up with from this president of the United States. Even saying that sticks in my throat. I hope we don't gloss over that. That would be a mistake. We have to demand decency from our politicians. We have to demand empathy from our politicians. And if we're not demanding that, what does that say about us as a society? How ugly and cruel and cold-hearted do we have to be to support anyone that speaks about other Americans this way? If you really want to know the measure of a person, you really, really, really want to know, is how do they treat the people that don't like them and don't support them? You know, a true Christian, and I say this because he's cozied up to evangelicals. He needs their vote. A true Christian turns the other cheek. A true Christian embraces his enemies. A true Christian prays for his enemies. A true Christian knows actually how to pray. And I don't see any of those traits, nor do most Americans, in our current president of the United States. I'm not looking for a saint. We didn't elect, or rather I didn't participate in that election supporting him. I supported a different candidate. But, you know, we're not looking for a venerable patron saint of politics to run the country, but we are looking for someone with basic human decency. And sometimes the best example of basic human decency is, what do they do for people that they know they can get nothing from? They cannot get campaign donations. They cannot get support. What do you say or do for those people? And I'm just so sick and tired of the pettiness and the ugliness, because when you have the leader of the free world speaking like this, openly, brazenly, it just foments more of that kind of hatred. It emboldens people that support him to act in a similar way, to behave against their neighbors and their members of community that they may not agree with or support in a similar way. And I think that's a dark period in American society. It's a very dark period. And so, I hope Donald Trump, whenever he kicks the bucket and buys the farm, I hope that he receives the same empathy he showed Rob Reiner and his wife. I hope he receives the same. I mean, there better not be any pearl-clutching conservatives or Republicans complaining about the response when Donald Trump finally buys the farm. That you better not be complaining if there's any jubilation or celebration, because you need to remember and not forget that Donald Trump, you need to remember how he behaved against others. He practically celebrated the deaths of his enemies here, and those deaths are Americans. So I don't need to get on this soapbox anymore. I need to get off because it's been over a week we've been living with this. And I think other social media influencers, and I don't think of myself as a social media influencer. I don't think I'm influencing anything. I just contribute within the social media universe. They've said it better than me. They've said it better and they've handled it better and more eloquently than I have. But what an ugly, ugly stain. But you know what? You can dispel the ugliness. You can cast out a lot of that darkness by shining the light on the life and work of Rob Reiner. And so again, if you haven't yet, go find a Rob Reiner film, put it on, check it out. I saw that Netflix elevated Rob Reiner's Stand By Me into the top of the queue as recommended. I saw that. It was almost like Netflix gets it. They know that people are looking for Rob Reiner's films to reacquaint themselves or to re-experience the feeling they had watching a Rob Reiner film, because that's a form of self-therapy. It's closure for some people, and that's certainly something I did, and it might be something that will benefit or help you. So enough about that. Rest in peace, the great Rob Reiner. You will be sorely missed. And I challenge you to find a director with such a great run of wonderful films that Rob had. Go on. Go find one. Misery. The guy could handle Stephen King. From Misery to Stand By Me, he could handle it. To Princess Bride, one of probably the greatest love stories ever told, with humor and action and fantasy. It was fantastic. What a great film. And then comedy. So, Rob Reiner was a man of extremely elevated talents. He could tell great stories. He was a wonderful storyteller as a director. So rest in peace. You are missed. And I urge you to check out his films to help yourself and help the rest of the world not forget how great he was. He was a good guy. That's the best way not to be forgotten, is to celebrate your works. It's like you're never really gone, if we can continue to find ways to celebrate you. Now, the other thing I want to talk to you about is a completely disposable piece of entertainment. You could say sports entertainment. It didn't really feel, sports entertainment is how they describe the WWE, with its scripted fights and these incredible acrobatics by these wrestlers in these choreographed type settings and their storylines, right? Well, it's not too far off to compare the boxing career of Jake Paul versus all these other either over the hill, former boxers, former MMA fighters, or a 60-year-old Mike Tyson. And that's been kind of frustrating because I'm a lifelong fan of boxing. I've loved the sport. I've talked about that before. I had an entire episode dedicated to Alexander Usyk when he beat Daniel Dubois for the second time and became undisputed again for the second time. So anyone who has listened to this podcast enough knows that boxing is my number one favorite sport. It is also the sport that breaks my heart all the time because of how corrupt it is and how shady these fight deals are. Well, a lot of people have been split down the middle. Has Jake Paul been good for boxing? Has Jake Paul been an embarrassment for boxing? And I think where I land when it comes to this is that Jake Paul is not a boxer. He's not. He has no amateur career. He has been learning on the job, as it were. Jake Paul is the king of cherry picking fights. So he will select people for an enormous payday. And it's hard not to push against the idea that what Jake Paul is trying to do is pad his boxing career with really the type of people that are happy to take a dive or to go down in the third, as it were, for an easy payday, especially MMA fighters, which are kind of perfect to prey on because Dana White hasn't paid them jack diddly squat for any of their fights in the UFC, right? And that's by and large the way it's been. But here you've got Jake Paul with this enormous horde of online supporters, millions of viewers, millions of subscribers, saying, "Hey, let's put on this fight at Madison Square Garden or in Dubai or wherever you want to do it. Let's go ahead and do it. Let's do it at Wembley. Let's do it in Vegas. Let's put on this boxing exhibition. You'll make more money. You'll make 10 times more money fighting me than you would have ever made in your entire career at the UFC. Are you game? Do you want to do it?" And many of them signed up and did it. Respected MMA fighters, most of them respected MMA fighters who have had careers that are noteworthy. Most of them have been noteworthy. Names that you recognize if you follow the UFC or just MMA in general. And Jake Paul has flattened all of them because none of these MMA fighters have any experience boxing as boxers. I mean, Anderson Silva, okay, yeah, but that's a late career thing, right? None of them trained as boxers. And I'll be able to say this. I will acquiesce and I will say that Jake Paul is a gifted, talented celebrity turned professional boxer. And what I mean by that, not that he belongs in the ranks or in the ring with any of the greats currently holding belts in multiple divisions. I'm not saying that. I'm saying if this kid walked into my gym, let's say I'm Mick, I'm Mick from Rocky. Let's say if this kid walked into my gym, forget the Lamborghini and the entourage and the ladies and all the tats and the glitz and the glamour and the bling. But let's say Jake Paul walks into my gym, laces up, starts punching the bag. I'm pretty sure I would see some talent. I would see some potential, right? I would never have guessed that he was on Disney or Nickelodeon or whatever it may be. I would never guess he's a social media influencer. And I would be impressed with his dedication. He's willing to put in the work. He's willing to do the sparring. He's willing to do the training. He's willing to accept feedback from trainers. He's willing to work within the system, within the framework that boxing exists in, right? I'd be impressed with all of that. But would I put him in the ring with actual career boxers, active career boxers? Absolutely not. No, I wouldn't do that. And I think Jake Paul knows that. He doesn't have any amateur experience. So he just decided to set up his own fights because there's money there. And a lot of boxing pundits have said Jake Paul has been good for the sport because he's introduced the sport to people that just like Jake Paul. They'll swallow anything that he releases in the sphere. I mean, if Jake Paul says this is backwash from my water bottle on my latest YouTube video and he puts it on eBay, there will be people bidding for it. I mean, that's where his cult-like status is as a celebrity. And so these people have said, he's been good for the sport. He's introducing it to a new generation. A lot of people say that boxing is on its way out because UFC or MMA, for that matter, is kind of taking over and filling the void where boxing used to fill, right? There might be some merit to that claim. I'm not going to completely discredit that. But I don't think Jake Paul has actually been good for boxing. And I don't really think that boxing needs to have Jake Paul fans superimpose what they think boxing should look like because their favorite YouTuber got in the ring and danced around and knocked some people out that just seemed like they were there to be knocked out, whether you're Tyrone Woodley or whoever it may be. I don't think he's been good for the sport. I think he's actually been harmful for the sport. He was, of course, until this weekend, because most of the fights that Jake was taking, he was making it look easy, especially when you consider that in the way boxing is, you'll hear stories about little Roy Jones Jr. was 5 years old in boxing. Little Floyd Mayweather has been boxing since he was 6 or 7 years old. Or Manny Pacquiao on the streets of Manila in the Philippines was boxing for his next meal as a child. You will hear a lot of these greats that have gone on to do great things, Hall of Famers, right? Some of them controversial. You'll hear that these boxers made a life of it. It was Canelo Alvarez turned professional when he was a teenager, 15. And then you look at their longevity in the sport, and then you got Jake Paul that just rolls up with no amateur career, and then just starts knocking non-boxers out, making clicks and views and all of that happening, right? And making an enormous amount of money doing it. An enormous amount of money doing it, fighting no one who's ranked in boxing. I mean, think about that. Think about how harmful that might be to the expectations that people have when they entered the sport. You know, Jake Paul made hundreds of millions of dollars fighting non-ranked, non-boxers. I want you to stomach that. I want you to think about that. Let me ask you this. Can you name the first 20 opponents in Canelo Alvarez's career? You probably can't, because he was paying his dues. He was fighting journeymen. He was trying to pad out his professional resume, but he was also trying to gain experience fighting different people in different styles before they could actually start making the big money fighting actual other high-ranked boxers, and that goes for almost any division. But to have Jake Paul come along and kind of cut the line, as it were, a lot of boxing purists, and I kind of lean in that camp, felt that what Jake Paul was doing is he had found a way, because he had an enormous amount of social media clout and finances, he found a way to kind of bypass the big long line that all these other fighters have to stand in and wait for their shot. Wait, you have to get the right promoter, you have to get the right fighter, you have to study the style, styles make fights, as they say. And I know I'm going on and on and on about this, and we do have a movie to talk about today, but all of that was very frustrating to me to see. I was disappointed in the fans of boxing. I was disappointed that Jake Paul seemed to be rigging his own fights. I was disappointed that Jake Paul doesn't submit to VADA drug testing. I was disappointed that we have no proof whether or not he's abusing performance-enhancing drugs. We have no proof of that. He doesn't submit to drug testing. He gets to be able to pick who he wants to fight. He selects the purse. He selects the mount. And he was clearly cherry picking. And yes, he can say he went in the ring for 8 rounds with Mike Tyson, but it was a 60-year-old Mike Tyson. And when you watch that film carefully, it looks like Mike Tyson was told, don't go full throttle on Jake. Take it easy. Again, it begs the questions, are some of these fights exhibition fights? And Jake Paul has threatened to sue people who say that his fights are rigged. So imagine my immense enjoyment after a very tough week, with Rob Reiner and everything else. Imagine my surprise getting out of the third Avatar film on Friday night and discovering the results of the 8-round fight that Anthony Joshua had with Jake Paul. Let me tell you something about Anthony Joshua. In boxing, most people focus on your losses, on your professional record. There's something really weird about demythologizing or demystifying fighters. If they suffer a loss, they're no longer invincible. Mike Tyson was mythological until he met Buster Douglas, and Buster Douglas busted him up and knocked him out in Tokyo. Canelo Alvarez was Mr. Amazing until he met Dimitri Bivol. But think about what happens in the boxing world when a boxer loses. We don't do this with baseball teams, basketball teams, because there's so many games, right? We don't do this with hardly any other sport. I mean, when we think about tennis, we don't think about the grand slams that Roger Federer may have lost, or Pete Sampras or Andre Agassi or any of these people. We don't think about that. We focus on their winning record, right? But when it comes to boxing, if you lose a boxing match, you are knocked down several pegs. And so when we think of Anthony Joshua, you're probably thinking, oh yeah, he's been beaten so many times. His last fight was a loss against Daniel Dubois. That was embarrassing. He's lost twice to Alexander Usyk. He's lost once to Andy Ruiz in a huge upset at Madison Square Garden years ago. Anthony Joshua's, come on, he's not that big of a deal anymore, right? And then you realize, wait, Anthony Joshua has had 28 wins on his record as a heavyweight. That's pretty good. But do you know how he got 24 of the 28 wins? By knockout. And I urge you to go look at his highlight reel if you want to see how devastating those knockouts are. Watch the episode of Anthony Joshua on Graham Norton when they brought out one of those digital boxing arcade type games where you punch the boxing glove and it will gauge the power behind your punch. And Anthony Joshua didn't, he looked like he held back a little bit, and even holding back what looked like he was holding back, without a doubt, the dude could probably knock out a raging bull. I mean, he could probably knock out a horse, Mungo style from Blazing Saddles. I'm not kidding. Anthony Joshua has got an enormous right hook, left hook, right hook. He's gifted. So Jake Paul agrees to get into this boxing match with Anthony Joshua. The press conference, the lead up, he's talking a lot of trash, talking about how he's going to have the greatest sports upset of all time, and he's probably right, it would have been. And he's talking out of his you-know-what, as per usual. And Jake Paul insisted on a larger ring, a 22.5 by 22.5 ring, which is significantly larger than what Anthony Joshua is used to fighting in. And it soon became clear as the rounds ticked by, as Jake Paul spent most of the fight on his back heel, most of the fight trying to avoid any combinations or anything beyond a jab from Anthony Joshua. It got to the point where a few rounds in, Jake Paul started falling on the ground all the time, a little bit like Deontay Wilder falling on the ground in his rematch with Tyson Fury, the second fight. It was starting to look shambolic. Even the ref said, and I heard it, the ref said, "Come on," to Jake Paul, "get up." The audience didn't pay to see this crap. There were boos because Jake Paul looked like he had no strategy, no plan to win, and he didn't set up any combinations. He was actually only trying to counterpunch with a big right hook, and he wasn't getting much done. And it was getting frustrating for me because I thought, if this isn't scripted, if there's not a predetermined outcome here already agreed upon between these two parties, then that's what it's starting to look like, because why would Anthony otherwise carry this kid for 6 rounds? But I watched, and it looked like he was trying to put things together, but he had to chase this significantly smaller opponent around the ring. Well, eventually, reality caught up to Mr. Jake Paul in the 6th round, and Anthony Joshua put together a couple hit combo and knocked him out. I don't mean he was unconscious, but he could not continue. This right punch that Anthony Joshua gave him, or maybe it was a left, no, I think it was a right hook in the corner, and the internet's full of the clip, snapped Jake Paul's jaw in 2 places. Now, I'll tell you something about boxers who have to get titanium plates attached to their jaws, their molars are rearranged, all of that. Your career is over. Your boxing career is over. You will probably not continue with, you have pins and plates in your mouth. You won't continue. That's usually a career-ending injury when it comes to boxing, and Jake Paul isn't really much of a boxer to begin with. So I will just tell you this, it was so satisfying. Mr. Jake Paul, who supports Mr. Donald Trump and the ICE raids and has made a lot of inflammatory comments that are disgusting to me, it was nice to see him get flattened. It was nice for him to finally meet reality. It was nice to see he can't cherry pick all of his opponents, that he cannot finagle his way around an outcome. So I really enjoyed that. I haven't enjoyed the result of a boxing match since, since Canelo crushed the orbital bone of Billy Joe Saunders. And before you start to feel sorry for Billy Joe Saunders, learn a few things about Billy Joe Saunders in and out of the ring, and then you'll be glad it happened to him. He's right up there with Adrian Broner and the Marcos Maidana fight, which was another very satisfying ending. On one of Pacquiao against Margarito. When Pacquiao flattened Margarito for 12 rounds. Just turned his face into cookie dough. There's been some pretty satisfying beatdowns in boxing. I can name off about a half a dozen. And the one that Anthony Joshua gave to Jake Paul on Friday night was long overdue and very well deserved and highly enjoyable. I hope you enjoy it. Anyway, enough about boxing. I could have a boxing podcast with somebody. If you love boxing and you're listening to this and you dabble in the art of podcasting, hit me up. I'd be happy to come on for an episode. I'd happy to talk boxing with you. I love boxing, love and hate it sometimes. So anyway, enough about boxing. Let's get back to movies. The other big thing I want to talk to you about before we get into the main topic of this podcast is it's related to the main topic of this podcast. My wife and I, a couple nights ago, we went to go see in 3D, in IMAX, James Cameron's third Avatar movie, Avatar, Fire and Ash. Now, I was excited to see it on IMAX because of an important feature. Actually, two things are in there, but we can talk about both of those briefly. One of them is the fact that Chris Evans, who plays Captain America, there is a brief teaser for the next Avengers Endgame movie, or Avengers Doomsday movie. That's what it is. And he's back. He's back as Captain America. So we just can't seem to let our superheroes die with dignity and stay in the past. So I'm not sure how I feel about that. I'm sure there's a perfectly reasonable explanation for that. The way the Marvel, their MCU story bends and twists and can always go back and into a different timeline and things like that. So there is that. But the big thing, the big reason that I wanted to see this on IMAX, first of all, you should want to see an Avatar movie on IMAX. If you're going to see it at all, you should want to see it the way it was intended, and that's on IMAX. But I knew that there was going to be a 6-minute preview of Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey coming out next year, and that this was just a long, extended scene with bits and pieces in it. I got to tell you, I was pleasantly blown away. I won't say I was surprised by what I saw. I've seen the set photos, and knowing that it's Christopher Nolan, I expect it to be top-notch quality. I expect, even in those 6 minutes, for it to be cinematic, epic, and I expect a rousing soundtrack, whoever is doing it for him. I'm not sure if it's Hans Zimmer, but I don't know who's doing it. I haven't Googled it or looked it up, but I expect all those things. I expect the type of attention to detail. I expect this kind of epic scope, and not just because it's shot on IMAX, but because Christopher Nolan tackles big topics now. He just isn't afraid. He's pretty fearless. And I got all that. I got all that in the trailer. Matt Damon is in the trailer. This is a scene that shows the arrival of the Trojan horse onto the shores. And I'm not a Greek scholar or a Greek historian of any renown by any measure, but I do know a little bit about the Trojan horse, and I know about what's in the Trojan horse, and I was excited to see how Christopher Nolan handled that. And so that's what this scene was, and it was handled extremely well. Very believable. And that's one of the things I enjoyed about Christopher Nolan's Batman films, is that he found a way to ground this larger-than-life superhero character, to ground them in practical effects. And so even the Bat car that Christian Bale drove was very practical. He deals with practicality. And I know that Christopher Nolan, which is one of the great things why I love him, he eschews, he hates, he tries not to use computer-generated effects. He does not like CGI. He likes to work with practical scenes, with practical special effects, things that technically could, within the physical realm of possibility, could actually happen, so that the audiences are more invested, I think, because we're more grounded in the world he has created. And we don't have to suspend so much of our belief going, that looked fake, or that looked like CGI, or this is going to age horribly. When computer graphics expands to a point that this will just look stupid, this will look like stop motion crap. No, Christopher Nolan wants his films 50 years from now to look fantastic. He is very much in the vein of Stanley Kubrick. And you can think about a lot of Stanley Kubrick's films, especially 2001, where they continue 50 plus years later they continue to, well, not quite 50, but they continue to not look dated or antiquated when it comes to special effects. And that's what Christopher Nolan's doing here. And so the 6 minutes that I got was, I mean, it might have just been a morsel from the main dish, but there's quite a lot to savor here. It's action, it's filmed at night. Most of it is filmed at night, and it is very clever. And I cannot wait to see how it all comes together next year for the full release. So count me in. I was going to see, I mean, I'm committed. I'm committed, probably like you are, to see every Christopher Nolan film that comes out. I'm just committed like you are. But now I'm even more excited, more anxious to see this because of how great those 6 minutes of this Odyssey advance clip. I'm just excited to see it. It looks fantastic. Anyway, so you know that I went to go see the latest Avatar film on the big screen in 3D in IMAX. So let's talk about it, mostly because I think most people are talking about it. So Fire and Ash, I can give you some basic thoughts. I'll try to keep that spoiler-free. In fact, I will keep it spoiler-free. I'm not going to talk about specific plot points and give things away, because I do expect you to go see it, because if nothing else, it's worth seeing on the big screen. Is it worth the ticket price? I think it is. If your budget's a little bit more flexible and you can splurge, see it on IMAX, because visually it's a treat. Visually, it's a great and beautiful film to look at. But if I have to be honest, I do find myself kind of agreeing with some of the other critics. This film, narratively, especially with its plot points, it is a lot like the second film, Way of Water. Our main protagonists and our main antagonists are squaring off again with the same people they squared off in the first film, in the second film. It's starting to feel like they just can't come up with compelling or new characters that step into the spotlight. I mean, there is a new antagonist, a new character in here, and that's played by Una Chaplin, who, if you didn't know, happens to be the granddaughter of Charlie Chaplin. So she's as Hollywood royalty, I guess, as you can get. And she plays the leader of this Ash people, Na'vi, and they hate their other Navians. And so she's part of the enemies, right? Part of the people that conspire against our main characters. It's a gorgeous film to look at. It's beautiful. It looks sumptuous. It looks great. But I didn't see a lot in Pandora, this third trip to Pandora, that I didn't see in the previous two films. I didn't see a lot of new creature creations. I just didn't experience anything brand new that was mind-blowing or fresh to me. It all kind of felt like the same dish with a different garnish, and then you call it something else. It kind of feels like going to Taco Bell and saying, let's see, what's in a burrito? What's in a beef burrito? Tortilla, beans, cheese, beef. Okay, so what's in a soft taco? Tortilla, beans, meat, cheese. Okay, so what's the difference between a soft taco and a meat burrito? Not much. We just get to call it something else so that you are left thinking, oh, these are completely two distinct things to eat at Taco Bell, even though as you're eating, you're going, this kind of almost tastes the same. It's just a bigger flour tortilla than the soft taco. There's a sameness to it. And it makes me wonder if James Cameron and his fleet of storyboard artists and writers might be running out of things to give audiences. I want to read some things that I wrote about it. Now, again, I'm keeping this as spoiler-free as possible, so I'll read my Letterboxd review for it, okay? So here it is. All right. Even Shakespeare's Polonius complained to Prince Hamlet that the traveling actors' Greek tragedy speeches were too long. And over 4 centuries later, there is still something to be said about testing audience patience. Cumulatively, audiences have had to sit through over 9 hours on James Cameron's Pandora in his Avatar films, with its mind-blowing special effects about the indigenous Na'vi trying to preserve their way of life from intergalactic colonialism hell-bent on exploiting their resources. This isn't quite as brutal as Leopold II's actual late 19th century subjugation of the Congolese during the rubber trade, but the environmental messaging was made crystal clear in Cameron's not-so-subtle first film that grossed more than $2 billion at the box office, which was unprecedented, I might add. 2022's Way of Water appropriated Maori culture and Pacific Islander teenage slang with its cuz and bro, terms of endearment that Cameron expected his audience to accept as actual common Na'vi sobriquets. I didn't buy it in 2022, finding the dialogue cloying and grating. Still, this is James Spectacle Cameron, and he's nothing if not a talented director of action set pieces and stunning visuals. In Avatar Fire and Ash, which I was able to be immersed in while watching on IMAX in 3D, the story delves deeper into the children of Jake Sully, played by Sam Worthington, and Neytiri, played by Zoe Saldana, after the events of Way of Water weigh heavily on the theme of family, unity, and survival. But these are also the same themes from the second film. And herein lies the central problem I had with Fire and Ash, as it begins to feel like the same dish served with a different garnish. In this overlong second sequel, the same concerns about a resurgent human military targeting the pristine air, lands, and seas of Pandora remain in place, and the same rogues gallery of bad guys are back for a third helping of hunting down Worthington and Saldana's brood, led by Stephen Lang's Colonel Miles Quaritch, who, like a bad penny, keeps turning up to wreak havoc on Pandora. But Cameron sets aside extolling the virtues of the noble savage, introducing audiences to a corruptible and equally warlike Na'vi ash people led by Varang, played by Una Chaplin, who cavorts around the film, smirking and engaging in snarling standoffs with Saldana, wearing a distinctive frilled headdress that conjures up memories of Wayne Knight being ambushed in Jurassic Park. When Chaplin's Varang inevitably teams up with Lang's Quaritch to face off again with Worthington and Saldana, we're given incredible action set pieces that is heavy on style, but lacking, as ever, in substance. I didn't hate this film. It's incredible what Cameron can do with a budget that rivals the GDP of a small third world country, but the rendering of the supporting Na'vi characters, like the children, as it did in Way of Water, seemed less emotive than those of the main Na'vi characters, leaving some of the interactions blank in expressions and testing my ability to differentiate them from the other Na'vi characters. I wonder how much code is applied to the supporting cast for those computer-rendered facial expressions, and I'm willing to bet they're a lot less than what they give Saldana, Lang, and Worthington. These Avatar films have been visual triumphs, but in the age of AI screensavers and digital images that increasingly test our ability to detect what is real and what isn't, the novelty that Cameron has enjoyed as a visionary director may be less and less spectacular and awe-inspiring. And it's an ironic development in entertainment, given that Cameron's Terminator films, especially T2, warned societies about the dangers of artificial intelligence. Don't get me wrong, I really love Cameron's earlier work and would like to see him tackle other stories in his enormously imaginative mind, including a True Lies sequel, another Alita film, and beyond. But I see no great tragedy if Avatar Fire and Ash is his final trip to Pandora, notwithstanding that there are 2 more sequels already written, waiting in the wings, presumably on the box office returns from this one, and handing these off to someone else, say Guillermo del Toro. And before you come at me, Guillermo del Toro is a huge fan of these Avatar films and would reverence them. If he was handed the reins, he would reverence them almost about as much as he wanted to for those Hobbit films for Peter Jackson, which unfortunately that didn't happen. But somebody like Guillermo del Toro might be able to breathe new life into these films the way Irvin Kershner did for the Star Wars franchise when he directed Empire Strikes Back. And that is my spoiler-free review of Avatar, Fire and Ash. And there isn't really any other way to slice it or cut it or to expand on that. It's just, it's a beautiful film to look at, like I said. But, this is the age of AI and Chat GPT and all these things. You can render videos of celebrities. You can render fan-made videos of Star Wars or whatever it may be. And by the way, Disney has kind of opened the door and encouraged fans to make renderings of Star Wars characters. That's kind of a weird flex, a weird thing to do, but it's getting really good. I have actually had to unlike certain social media posts because I got fooled into thinking some, trendy videos, either on TikTok or Facebook, were of actual things going on. And I've had to oh, wait, that's AI. I'm pretty good at liking things that are not AI. And the fact that it is AI, I don't want to be in support of that. So as we see AI continue to become more and more of a presence in entertainment and in social media, especially in social media, my concern is that these films from James Cameron, these Avatar films, might not seem as novel and groundbreaking and mind-blowing in their special effects as before, because some of the scenes in these Avatar films, they do look like interactive screensavers on computers that you can get now. And that's a shame. There's really no law that prohibits that. The only thing I can say is that if you don't support the proliferation of AI images or AI videos, trending on social media, try to block it. Try to speak out against it if that's how you handle it. But don't support it. Don't retweet it. Don't post up on your socials about those things if that's important to you. And it is important to me. It's really important to my son. He can't stand anything that uses AI. So he's very much in solidarity with content creators that don't use it. And I think that's an admirable thing to support. And I think it's made a lot of Hollywood directors very nervous, because you can take a very low budget film and you can access AI images and you can actually make a very low budget film look pretty damn good, look pretty impressive. And I've seen some videos. I've watched some videos on YouTube and beyond of scenes and characters, and I've had a hard time telling that they're fan-made. Beware of the fan-made movie trailers for films that don't exist but are clickbait, because you see something trending and you're like, oh wow, 2 million views on this. How did this movie trailer for this incredible film that's going to come out, Rocky 8 or something, what is going on? How did this slip off my radar? I don't remember this film being announced, but let me watch the trailer. And then halfway through, you're realizing, oh, wait a minute, this is a fan-made trailer. But it takes a while. You almost have to give it another look. So, as that continues to happen, my worry and concern is that, I think people will be less and less impressed with this visionary scope that Cameron and others have had making these kinds of films. So maybe it's time for James Cameron to get off Pandora, turn over the reins to someone else, let them breathe new life. By all means, produce it. Be an inspiration, be a presence, produce those films, because I guess there's 2 more in this thing. But let's try something else. I say that because in the third film, the second film and the first film, you were introduced to new creatures. You were introduced to, flora and fauna you had not experienced before. In this film, I didn't see, we weren't really introduced to different kinds of flora and fauna, different creatures in this. Didn't see as much of that. And I would have liked to have got off Pandora. What if there's another moon other than Pandora circling the system? Well, let's go and check that out. Maybe we can get the Na'vi off of Pandora and have them go be warriors on another planet and save them from being exploited by human exploration and mining for resources. There's so many different things I think you could do with this. It really felt like they just kind of gave us this third film and it didn't really break new ground in the way that the other films had, especially the first film. So I guess I'm looking for something different. I didn't quite get that. It is fascinating to spend this much time on Pandora. It is a beautiful film to look at, but I think it's time for Cameron to move on. Let's move on. You've made your mark. You've changed Hollywood. You've changed the way these films are made. You've changed the way audiences can experience a big screen version of your film. You've done it. Now let's go give us something else. Do you have another Terminator film? Apparently he does. Jamie Lee Curtis is still doing very well in Hollywood, and Schwarzenegger isn't going anywhere. Could you give us another True Lies film? Could you? I'd have so much fun with that. True Lies is one of my favorite action films. Right up there with Die Hard. Great film. So funny. And Cameron was great in this. He did such a great job. I'd like to see another film. Or maybe something else completely different. So, yeah, that was pretty much my take. It wasn't a waste. It wasn't a wasted ticket. I did lower my expectations. I wasn't expecting to see something truly astonishing. I wasn't expecting to see Pulitzer Prize winning level writing or an original concept. I wasn't so much expecting that. And that's because that's not what I ended up getting. But it would be nice for Cameron to try something with a smaller budget. Let's see what you can do. How resourceful can you be with a smaller budget and a different story? That is what I would like. And that's probably why I like indie films so much, because they are forced to take smaller budgets. And when you're forced to take a smaller budget, you get creative. You can get really creative, and you work with the hand you're dealt. And some really interesting things can happen when you don't have limitless amounts of money to do whatever you want. So I'd like to see Cameron make a more smaller, grounded film and see what he can do with it. Anyway, I don't have much more to say except that I hope you have a very Merry Christmas. I hope that you enjoy your kith, your kin. I hope that you keep family in your life for this week. Don't be alone on Christmas. That's not good for anybody. I spent a Christmas alone once. Wasn't very enjoyable at all. I spent a few Christmases alone when I was single, and not a good experience. So I hope you spend this time with people you love, and I hope you give grace to those that you have history with. This is a time for peace, a time for coming together, a time for laying old grievances aside, and giving people a moment to be a part of your life again. Bury the hatchet. I say that because it's advice I need. I have some hatchets to bury. I won't get into personal stuff here, but I have a few hatchets to bury in my extended family, and I need to do that. So just trying to find the right words and the right way to do it so it doesn't seem insincere. Anyway, Merry Christmas. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.